Chapter 9, Mishnah 2. When an area in which it is permitted to carry is open to an area in which it is forbidden to carry, and there is no valid partition between them, the forbidden area causes the permitted area to be forbidden as well. Moreover, even if two permitted areas are open to each other, but it is forbidden to carry from one to the other, carrying becomes forbidden within these areas as well, unless there is a valid partition separating them. See the Mishnah in Chapter 7, Mishnah number 2. Our Mishnah will discuss two cases where one private domain is completely open to another, but only one of them is forbidden. It begins with a case of two neighboring rooftops, where the houses are not joined by an Erev. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. If there is a large rooftop next to a small rooftop with no Erev joining them and no wall separating them, and the large rooftop overlaps the small one on both sides, carrying in the large rooftop is permitted, because the places where the large rooftop juts out on either side of the small one create a valid partition for the large rooftop. But carrying on the small rooftop is forbidden because the overlaps are not considered a partition for the small rooftop. Therefore, the small rooftop is considered completely open to the large rooftop, and since the rooftops are not joined in an Erev, carrying on the small rooftop is forbidden. A similar case of two neighboring courtyards with no Erev between them. If there is a large courtyard that was breached, i.e. its wall collapsed, so that it now opens to a neighboring small courtyard, and the large courtyard overlaps the small courtyard on both sides of the breach, carrying in the large courtyard is permitted, but carrying in the small courtyard is forbidden, because the breach is like the entranceway of the large courtyard. Thus, the large courtyard has a valid partition separating it from the small one, and one may therefore carry in the large courtyard. The small courtyard, however, has no partition separating it from the large one. Therefore, just as one may not carry between the large courtyard and the small courtyard, so too it is forbidden to carry in the small courtyard. The Mishnah continues with a case of a courtyard bordering a public domain, with no valid partition between them. As mentioned above, rabbinic law forbids carrying in such a courtyard. The Mishnah will now address the biblical status of the area where the wall once stood. If there is a courtyard that was breached so that it is now open to a public domain, one who carries from the place of the breach, that is, from the place where the wall once stood, to a private domain, or from a private domain to it, is liable for transgressing the malacha of transferring from domain to domain. This is because the place where the wall once stood is now considered a public domain. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The sages disagree. They indicate their disagreement by citing the law of the courtyard itself. But the sages say, one who carries from inside the courtyard to the public domain, or from the public domain into it, is exempt. He has not transgressed biblical law, because the courtyard is now like a carmelis and not a private domain. By the same token, the sages argue the place where the wall once stood should also be considered a carmelis, not a public domain. Thus, one who carries between the place of the wall and a private domain is also exempt.